Hello and welcome to E-commerce Matters, brought to you by BlackCurve. We help e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. Today's title is Competitor Product Matching Explained. I'm joined by Dr. Rob, the TV installer Horton. He will tell you about that later. I'm Philip Huthwaite, the founder of BlackCurve. And without further ado, Rob, shall we get pricing?
Yeah. Why you gotta do me like that, man?
Well, when you start taking over the intros, you can have a laugh at my expense.
Okay, challenge accepted.
So you can do next week's one. How about that?
Of all the BlackCurve related news we had to talk about today, you picked.
Yes, I could have said we announced a funding round. I could have said we did a product launch, but instead I decided to talk about your TV installation escapades. Do you want to share for our wonderful listeners what happened?
I don't really know what happened. I moved the TV and I put my back out. It's really, and I didn't actually. The really weird thing is I didn't feel it doing into the TV, so I had no idea. I think I did it. I think I tore it earlier, and then that was the final straw. But enough of that.
That's what aggravated it. So, well,
Yeah.
Rob is doing a service because despite his back being put out, he is here. He is ready to use his voice box to tell us the wonderful things about competitor product matching. So what prop have you brought, Rob, to describe today's podcast?
Well, I'll show you. I have got my camouflage jacket,
Oh.
so I can match and blend into my surroundings. You can't see me now, can you?
Oh. Rob is holding up a camouflage jacket for those of you who are listening.
In a very white painted room.
Where have you gone? I can't see you. It's just you were there a minute ago and now you're gone. Where have you gone? I like that. Do you want to see mine?
Yep.
Do 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 boom 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 boom.
Is that a Tintin rocket?
It is, and it's other rocket ships are available. It's a rocket ship, okay? Because there's many. This is many levels. So stay with me, Rob. So,
Right.
okay, not only if retailers get their competitor pricing strategy right, will they accelerate their growth and go to the moon. So I'm holding up a little toy rocket ship. Okay, so that's number one. Okay, number two, today we're going to demystify competitor product matching. We're going to break it down. We're going to take the parts. See, it's a magnetic rocket ship,
Yeah,
and you can take the parts down.
For context, Philip is taking the rocket apart.
It's pretty neat.
Piece by
You have,
piece.
if you're listening, go and watch the video. It's great. Go and watch the video.
It'll be on LinkedIn. This bit will get clipped out, and
And I've forgotten what the third one was. Oh yeah, the third one was after I talked to my wife, who is a publisher and a bit of a wordsmith. She said that competitor pricing doesn't need to be rocket science.
hey, bada bing.
Bada bing, bada bong. So there we go. Rocket ship and camouflage. I think we sort of passed the test for props today.
I'd say yours, definitely.
We'll have to keep a running tally.
I was trying to find Guess Who. I know it's in the house somewhere, but I just I couldn't find it. I found Cluedo, other board games, like literally some really like random ones, but ended up with a camouflage jacket.
Well, I used to love Guess Who, so maybe we'll have to do a future podcast, just us playing Guess Who, shall we?
We can make a product version.
There we go.
Oh, I'm going to get our marketing team on that. Stop this top of the funnel.
Stop top of the funnel. More important, we need to release a
I've
Guess
had a
Who
brand
board.
idea. We're making Guess Who, but with FMCGs. FMCG.
Well, we've got to spend the money on something, so why not blow the budget on a Guess Who board? So there we go.
Yeah, I need 100 kits and a sticker printer, and then we're away.
I don't think it's going to be our best idea, but hey ho, we'll keep us entertained nonetheless. So let's go back to the podcast.
That's my best idea. We're in a lot of
Well, hopefully we have come up with some better ideas today. So that's the first. Let's see if we get some more. So today we're looking at competitor product matching and explained. And I thought it'd be a great idea for us to just like peel back the curtain, talk about the controversial topic, actually, when we talk to a lot of retailers, there's frustration, or there's there's a challenge to suppliers of competitor data of how do you know it's a match? I really want to make sure it's a match. There's a desire for, if you're making decisions off competitor data, for it always to be 100% accurate. And so I thought today would be good for us to have a conversation around, how does a competitor data supplier go about matching products? So taking a product from one retailer and saying, right, this other retailer is selling the same or similar. Okay, and just going through that process and sort of demystifying it a bit. So it's almost like a 101 kind of talk about competitor product matching. So before we go into that though, I thought we were to talk about why are retailers concerned about getting visibility of what products their competitors are selling and what prices those products are being sold at. Rob, what's your viewpoint or take on that?
Yeah, it's really interesting, I think, actually. So there's two things going on here. There's like the understanding your marketplace, and then there's also kind of an internal strategic positioning piece. The thing I find really interesting when we first talk to people, especially haven't gone far down this pricing journey, is that they're either like heavily in one camp or another, in that they are completely addicted to competitor data. Like, they need to know what their competitors are doing at any time as rapidly as possible, and seem to make every business decision based on that. Or they loathe, I almost saw that, but or they loathe it. They don't want to go anywhere near it. They see it as, often these guys actually have been burnt by poorly implemented reprices in the past. And so the reaction is, no, I'm just going to do my cost plus, screw the rest of it. It's all right. What you're really trying to do, though, the core business problem you're trying to solve is to understand the marketplace that you're competing in. If you're selling products that aren't own brand or aren't unique, like not like your Apple iPhone or whatever that we talked about in the previous podcast, but you want to understand part of the puzzle for where you can sell at and how you can price is what other people are doing, right? So that's the core, often the core commercial question, I would say. The interesting thing is that, we've spoken about this before, is it weaves into a lot of other business processes. So it's heavily linked into kind of your Google search. I mean, it's a core metric. Price is a core metric. We've spoken about that before, but in Google is a core factor in conversion. Not necessarily kind of, well, conversion through to your website, not necessarily sealing the deal on buying, but it definitely is. You have to be competitive to be in the right zone to get people in to look at your website. So there's kind of a user journey piece, and then there's a internal commercial competitive benchmarking piece.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, just for the sake of today, we're not going to focus on necessarily the dangers or why retailers might have been burnt through the use of competitor data in the past. We'll save that for maybe another day. And actually, we have covered it on. We have covered sort of the pros and cons of competitor data in the past.
I meant to say, but I've got sidetracked, as I often do. Is that it is a really cool piece. Like, you need to. You're kind of fighting blind. If you have a supplier and you're selling goods, you should know what other people are doing. Because you need to just strategically to understand how your business sits, how safe your business is in the marketplace, whether other people are being naughty. We can go into that a bit as well, but a lot of suppliers use competitor data, scrape data to ensure people are maintaining their price rules that they're setting down. So you should be looking at it. How like it's extremes and the rest of it, but it is a core component.
I mean, if you're going to take a simplistic view of your inventory, if you're selling kind of commodity-based products, actually, even if you're not selling commodity-based products, okay, there is each product that you sell has some form of price point in people's minds, or the market sets that price point, right? So therefore, by you listening to the market and using that data, that gives you an indication of where you should be, okay? And absolutely, some people in the world of e-commerce, they vote with their clicks, with their credit cards, based on what price, on a certain percentage of your inventory, based on what price you have on your website.
It's deeper than that. If your price isn't right, your advert won't get shown. So whether people will click on your site or not is kind of by the by if they can't click on your site to begin with. So.
Yeah, and that's alludes to what you said earlier about the Google algorithms and so forth. That your share of impression, if you're in certain products, if that are market sensitive, the algorithm doesn't disallow you, but it doesn't promote you as highly as other products if you're not within the range of the market price. So there's lots of kind of nuances to this. I mean, one that I'll throw into the mix before we kind of move on is around product selection and using it less on the form of what price your competitors are selling at, but also using it to identify what's the overlap in products, what's competitor A, competitor B, competitor C selling that I'm selling, also what are they selling that I'm not selling, and then that enables you to maybe, I don't know, support your marketing spend. So you might want to build out a certain niche or a certain sub-segment that makes you, in your marketing to the outside world, that makes you differentiate yourself from your competitors. So not only can you use competitor data to kind of be a bit more tightly coupled with the market, you can also use it to help you differentiate from the market. There's two sides to the coin.
You can also, like, the people's storefronts, for want of a better term, give a lot away about the nature of their business. You can monitor stock levels and prices to get an indication of their turnover or their profitability. We know we work with people who've done that previously. And it's quite smart because it's really important to know, well, they're running a completely different strategy to me. There is no point me trying to compete with them because, I don't know, they're VC backed or they're a publicly listed company and have a completely different kind of business goal. They're super growth orientated and on profitability focused. Like, if you were, I mean, just to talk about BlackCurve a little bit, we're venture backed, right? So, and that factor, and we're capital efficient, so that kind of factors into how we run a business and all the rest of it. And you could look at another pricing company, and they might have a completely different strategy. They could, for example, be like a smaller business that does one thing incredibly well and just focuses on that, and that's their core product. And they can look at the range of stuff we do and think, well, we're just going to beat them here. And it's exactly the same in product selection, in that if you can't go, like, if you're a small guy or a small shop, you can't go up against Amazon and run the same model, right? Because you don't have the distribution and all the rest of it. But you may have cornered the market on certain products that people really trust you on. And this is kind of what you were alluding to in kind of differentiation and using it that way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, without labouring the point too much, I mean, you might do some competitor research and identify that there's one supplier that's changing prices. I was going to say as much as Amazon, but let's shoot for Amazon. On average, they change prices 8 times a day. You might identify another retailer that's in your space that's, I don't know, changing it 10 times a day or 6 times a day, right? And you might decide, well, actually, I just haven't got the resources or I don't have the appetite to go that intraday.
To my customers,
yeah.
And it pisses them off.
Yeah, exactly. But these are the kind of learnings that you can get from competitor data. That's not just about the price.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's the additional extra benefits of using competitor data. So I think let's draw a line under why people would be interested in competitor data, and there's lots of other resources on our blog and on our podcast which go into this in more detail and look at the pros and cons and alike. So let's move on and look at competitor product matching. And I mean, just to touch upon it, we get asked time and time again, okay, you're making a pricing decision off what your other competitors are selling that product at. How do you know you're making the right decision? And more often than not, think questions like, how do you know it's an exact match? How do you know it's a like for like match? So should we talk about what we mean by, let's talk about what we mean by an exact match first of all. So to you, Rob, what is an exact match?
this is a can of worms. So
I'm talking about exact match. I'm not talking
I
about
still think
sort of. I'm
I
talking
still think it's a
exact
can of
match.
worms. But exact match is exactly the same product, right? Not to talk about how you try and solve it for now, but what that means is that the two spheres experiment, you can't tell them apart, right? In that, like, product A equals product B, the properties are the same, it is the same product, same supplier, same whatever. That for me is an exact match.
I mean, I've just looked at my desk to try and pick up something which might support this example. So I've got some batteries here. Okay, they are Energizer batteries, Max Plus Power Seal technology, AAA.
Batteries are available.
Yeah, other batteries are available. An 8-pack, okay, probably not to be sold separately. And this has various barcodes on it. It's got a barcode on the back. It's got a logo from a named brand. It's got various identifications, symbols on it. So an exact match would be this. Absolutely, all those credentials: name, product name, description, barcode, all of the identifiers being exactly the same from another retailer. That for me is an exact match. Okay.
Yeah. There's because there's 2 points here. There's what's an exact product match and what's the kind of exact tech, and how do you do it, which is what you're getting into. But like, I think it really can just to answer it conceptually, you have an exact match, which is the same product, and then you have things like substitute products, which would be Duracell versus.
We're coming to that.
Yeah. But that's the first, because the first thing is, what is an exact match? An exact match is the same product. The follow-up is, how do you know if it's an exact match? And then this is where it gets more challenging.
Because this is when we get into the world of like for like matching, or so you could argue. I mean, this is this is an Energizer brand, right? To stay with these batteries examples, you can have exactly the same pack from Tesco's selling. Sorry, I suppose you can have it from Tesco's, which is a retailer. I was thinking more Duracell. You could have something like a Tesco own brand or a Sainsbury's own brand set of batteries, that exactly the same number of batteries. But then the specifications might be sort of different, like how long life is it, or how many hours of power does it give you, and so forth. Okay,
brand association.
Yeah. So technically, okay, from just, again, not looking in the eyes of the consumer here, technically they are not exact matches, but they are like for like matches. Now, if we peel back the curtain further, okay, let's throw the consumer in. The consumer might not consider those like for like matching, because the consumer might say, well, hang on a minute, I know Energizer batteries have a better brand name than Tesco's. Aren't exactly known for their battery prowess. They're a supermarket company, so that's not a like for like match. So you kind of, I hope I probably didn't pick the best example of batteries for best example.
But you've picked a really good one, because you've picked probably one of the like most subtle in the, and I think we're going to get into this later, in terms of differentiating at a kind of if you're a store at e-commerce level versus at the consumer level, because you're bang on in that, like, for whatever reason, I think mostly because they used to have the little thing that you could press on the side to see how much power was left in it. I've got a really strong brand association with Duracell, and I'm sure that's just because of the amount of money they have paid in advertising over the years, if I'm completely honest, because they still do it. I used to be TV ads, it's now YouTube ads. I don't really own anything that takes batteries anymore, but I really have, like, what do I think the best battery brand is? Duracell. Why? No idea. Right? Advertising, largely. Again, Energizer, that's another strong one. And then you get into anything other than those two, I kind of start feeling a bit weird about. And a Tesco own brand, or some of the, like, the Japanese big electronics companies make them, I'm sure they're great batteries. I just don't know anything about them, and this is the really interesting point, really, in that from a buying thing, even if the own brand batteries are substantially cheaper, which they tend to be, I'd probably buy the more expensive ones because of that brand association. It's bizarre. Now I'm saying it out loud.
But that's because the elements that you've been exposed to throughout your life, you know, and not just the battery adverts, you know, your way of buying might be more conditioned towards, if there's any fear or uncertainty or doubt, you're perfectly prepared to spend a bit more to hopefully de-risk that purchase, right? Maybe I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, but maybe
No,
I'm thinking that's.
And I think the interesting thing is, I think that risk is like artificial. We're going off on a tangent a bit here, but like, this is more kind of consumer buying behavior. But like that, I'd never really thought about this before. But like, there's an example of a product where I have absolutely no idea. I have anecdotal evidence that like Duracell ones did last longer than my Xbox controller,
which is very important when you're playing late at night. You don't want to be able to.
Oh, it's so frustrating actually, because those things are rinse batteries. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, let's get back.
But I think it was important to touch upon that, because these are the conundrums that you know, we have a wide range of listeners. Some are consumers, some are retailers, right? Some aren't even in the sector, and some are just innocent bystanders. But you know, if you're to make a pricing decision based off of market data or competitor data, you know, these are the types of questions and types of philosophical questions that you need to get over in order to implement your pricing strategy effectively. And I hope we'll touch upon these a bit later on, subject to timing, because I feel that we might have opened up a can of worms. We might run out of time here. So there's a whole host of reasons, and that's why a lot of the time when we're engaging with in trials of our software that helps e-commerce companies make pricing decisions, a lot of the initial questions are, oh, I'm a bit nervous about automated pricing because I want to make sure that you're always going to make the price, you're always going to make a decision off an exact match, because then I'm under no doubt that you're making the right move. Okay, but what I that's absolutely a good place to start, because I think, you know, you take all possible ambiguity out of the equation, but without trying to give the conclusion away, I'm going to hopefully try and change the direction of conversation a bit and get you to think more broadly, because like the buying behavior that we just spoke about from a battery point of view, there's more to it than just simply the price of the exact match. There's the price of the comparable products, the alternatives that are available, okay? And also, we'll come on to it as Mr. Google, but we'll come on to that in a moment, okay? So, Mr. Google, Mrs. Google, and their children. So how does a company like ours go about collecting this competitor data? So how do we go about matching? And I think it might be worth starting with Google, right? In terms of products available on the Google Shopping Marketplace, how do we go about collecting competitor data?
Yeah, or like I would say, or Bing, or single kind of user path. So the idea, the reason businesses like ours work is that we do something that's scalable, which means we have to kind of find one process that we can repeat and is similar across all clients. And so what we do is really mimic a user journey. We Google a product, and then what we Google basically determines the accuracy. But really, all companies like us do are that kind of, if someone says they provide kind of Google Shopping feed data or Amazon data or Bing data or whatever, they are just automating the process of using those engines. So we just make a lot of searches and then harvest the results. It's really that simple. So when you're saying, I don't know, product X, I don't know, the stupid Hitachi TV that did my back in, we just effectively would Google that and take the price list down that comes back. So we'll drill into that a little bit in a minute, but the other end of it, so that's the kind of like SaaS play scalability thing. The other end of it is that you can do kind of bespoke searching. So if you've got a few key competitors, this is more relevant often in things like travel and tourism, where trying to think of examples I can actually talk about, but like so if someone's running transportation, those routes, there are usually only a few people on those routes, whether it's like buses or coaches or ferries or whatever, and so you know who your competitors are, so you can build kind of software to scrape your competitors' websites, and that works up to probably about 5 or 6. But the issue is with that is that you have to, in effect, build bespoke software for every. You can kind of tune bits of it, but it really is a bespoke setup for every competitor website that you want to do, because the paths are different. Like the user journey is different. The kind of prices and buttons are in a different place. And you can do clever things with images and the rest of it, but really it's a much harder problem than kind of repeating one search path. So it just costs you more money. People will do it for you.
Yeah, so
sorry, yeah.
So I was going to say, so let's take it one stage at a time. So if we come back to Google Shopping, all intents and purposes, a supplier, if I understand it rightly, is of competitor data is putting in a search term into the Google Shopping search box, getting a set of results, and then extracting that data from the web page, putting it into a database, and then surfacing that to the end retailer, whether that be in an Excel spreadsheet or whether that be through an online web portal such as BlackCurve. Yeah. Now, if we're to look at exact matching, okay, Google has it's not a Google ID, but Google works on GTINs primarily, which is a global trade identification number. I hope I've got that acronym right. Okay, and that is a recognized number pretty much internationally in a lot of countries. Each country has a body that kind of is the overseer, if you will, of implementation of this, so that there aren't, it's trying to minimize duplicates. It's trying to be the gatekeeper of it. And the reason that GTINs help is because that helps you get, and it doesn't always, because some people, if a retailer uploads the wrong GTIN, but Google does actually penalise this later. But that allows an exact match, doesn't it? So you know that if you put the GTIN into Google, it allows an exact match.
Yeah, exactly. So GTIN is an example of product identifier. What product identifier is used does vary a bit from industry to industry. So other people use kind of manufacturer part numbers if they're more closely to the supplier. There is a very tire specific one that we've come across. It's that I can't remember the name of, but it's literally some person's name, because I want to say something else, but I think it's different. There's fluid mechanics in my head for some reason.
But if we state, so that's how you get an exact match. Now, top tip before we go any further. Excuse me, I'm about to cough. Top tip before we go any further. If you are struggling to find a product, okay, and someone's asked you to find a product to buy from them, all right, and you're really struggling to find it online, try and get the GTIN, or it's out of stock in one place, okay, and actually you want to find a better price, get the GTIN, and it's generally buried in the product description of a company. Whack it into Google Shopping, and that will help you find it a cheaper place than somewhere else.
It's really interesting. If you found the product in Google Shopping, go on the shopping page, find the thing that says GTIN at the bottom, and then search for that, and you'll get a different set of results. I actually found my girlfriend's Christmas present. She wanted some, so this is a shout out. I'll take a Birkenstock sponsorship. I'm going to say well. So I got these for my birthday, and they're a Birkenstock clog because we're indoors all the time. They've got kind of like arches and the rest of it. They're really nice. And Jess wanted some. And the whole world is sold out of loungewear. But if you GTIN search, you find a load of random websites that are listing them and not so far along the kind of Google optimization chain, and then you can get them. The funny thing is, it turns out that a lot of people in e-commerce that work in e-commerce shop like this, because we were talking to one of our clients, and he uses kind of the long tail search term. So he comes from more from the marketing end. So he'll search for, and we're actually going to get into this in terms of kind of what else you can search for. But like this kind of next layer where you tie in product name, brand, color, blah, 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 and stack all the product properties together. And that's also another good way of doing this. So it does work in practice, right? Like we're out there scalping Christmas presents.
So there's our top tip. So that's how ultimately you're trying to get a unique identifier, for another way to describe it, to enable you to get an exact match. Now,
and it is worth saying that, I don't know whether you're going to go on to this, but having a unique identifier does not guarantee an exact match. Right?
Yes, because the Google feed runs off your merchant center, and it depends on how proactive or how good the company is, that retail company is, of uploading GTINs. Also, some people do try to piggyback. So if there's a GTIN that's selling particularly well and a retailer doesn't have that particular product, they assign the wrong GTIN to that product purposely to get picked up. Now, again, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. That will come to bite you in the arse later for that retailer that does it, because you will subsequently be penalized. But it's just something to watch out for, that if you happen to scrape data on that day and that price is wildly off, and you're just making a pricing decision with no safeguards, there is the potential for you to make kind of an incorrect decision.
I do want to hammer this home a bit, because I think this bit is really important. And a lot of the time when reprices go wrong, it's because people haven't done the due diligence at this data end. So the key ones are, as you said, I think the key one is people mislabeling. I think a lot of it isn't malice. It's just people are copying and pasting things and then they get things wrong. There are, like you say, people spoofing. So there are problems with kind of products manufactured either in the same factory or in a different factory, but not with the brand name on it. And people will kind of mimic that with the GTIN. The other one I had is pack sizes. So people will often, so a GTIN really should contain it, but people will often use the same GTIN for 1, 5, 10, 20. So if you see a large spread, and actually you can, it's quite interesting if you're a maths geek, but like data geek, you get like a bumpy distribution, because you get the peaks around the 1, the 5, the 10, and the 20, because the people are using the same GTIN for that whole product range. So if you're matching minimum price and you've got a 10 pack, make sure you're not matching a 1 pack, right? Like, and then there's the final one, which is Google is trying to help the consumer, because especially for the Google search stuff, if like they're not doing it to make it easy for you to get your competitors' data, they're doing it to suggest products to a consumer who's looking for something. So they're already doing some kind of matching and optimization behind the scenes. So you might just get Google trying to be helpful with a substitute product or a different product, or a product they're trying to push for whatever reason. I don't know anything about how that all links up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is probably a good point to move on to another way of trying to get to an exact match, but also moving into a territory of a like for like, or a Google recommended match. So some retailers come to us and say, BlackCurve, we don't have GTINs, or I want an extra level of confidence above and beyond just GTIN. So the other way that you can do it is, and we do this as well, is that into the Google Shopping, you basically put in any string of search terms and use that to get the results. So it's exactly the same as putting in a GTIN into the Google search term. You could do a string like product name, brand name, and I don't know, part code, or the one that the buzzword at the moment is manufacturing part number, or NPN number. You could do NPN number on its own instead of GTIN if that's all you have. And it's exactly the same that you get a set of results from Google. It's surfaced, they're extracted, and we extract from Google, and then we process that in a database, and again surface it into our platform. Now, this is where we start to get into the territory of, is it a match? Because the risk that it's not an exact match exponentially increases at this stage. Okay. Now, that's because the more ambiguous search terms you put in, there's the possibility. There's almost like there's higher possibility of stuff sneaking in. Okay, because Google might trying to be clever and might trying to recommend. But however, we've done multiple tests across multiple sectors, both with eyeballing it and also both algorithmically of checking the quality of the data, and you still get very high accuracy score of using like product name and description and so forth. Now that gets you the data. How can we make sure that data is right? I mean, other than necessarily going through line by line and going, yep, that I agree that picture's the same as that picture's the same as that picture. How else can we test that the data's correct?
Algorithmically, it's hard. Like at scale, it is really difficult because you're having to shop. So the real simplest way, which I've got a bet with one of our internal guys that I think I'm going to win, is that I still think top and tailing, just saying ignore everything above and below this will get you most of the way there, no matter what you do, because I do have a massive argument for it. But like, you end up with a distribution in effect, and then the width of that distribution varies based on your search term in price, right? So if you're looking for an exact price match to what you have. And so really by what they call Windsorizing, but like clipping the sides of the distribution off and being clever around how you do that is quite a smart approach. Because really what you're saying is that like my price is here, I've got a competitive zone either side of it, and I'm only going to look at people in that unless it's, I don't know, something I really need to do about. Because that also takes up things like, which we didn't mention actually, people, do you want to follow your competitors' discounts, right? That kind of thing. Suddenly something's dropped by 50%. Do you want to follow that? Some people do, some people don't. Varies product to product, whatever. So the simplest way, look at the price distribution. The second thing is that like a lot of the things we talked about, Google uses as well. So GTIN, brand name, kind of, they in their advertising blocks, they have a number of properties which they require. And this is what Philip alluded to, in that they also actively penalize you if that data's bad or doesn't line up with what they've seen from your site. So, and that data can give you a good indication of whether it's like for like, right? Because we don't do a lot of fashion, fortunately. We have some fashion people we work with, but that gets tricky when you get into kind of color, size, all those kind of variables, of which price and especially discount. Like there's a lot of discounting in fashion as well that can spread across, and suddenly you're in this world of hurt where you're trying to match really quite disparate products with like large, I'm trying to not be really mathsy here, but I'll be a little bit mathsy, but like combinatorial spaces, because they have so many properties that they can vary so much. If I'm selling like a 32-inch TV by a certain brand, I'll worry there from a competitive data perspective is really whether it's the right brand and model for that 32-inch TV, which is quite straightforward. Then if you think about a trainer, that has got to be size, style, color, a whole host of other details, icons, I don't know, and the rest of it. And suddenly that becomes a much harder thing to guarantee a like-for-like match on than something that we can just get the metadata from Google and say, well, they're the same brand, they're the same size, they've got the same parts in them, blah, 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 blah.
No, absolutely. And I think, that gets you a hell of along the way there. And then it depends on how much degree of accuracy you want to go beyond that. I mean, you could do certain things like avoid, to get over the concept of pack size, you could say remove any data that has the word pack in it, for example, which means that, okay, fine, you don't necessarily reprice off the back of that, but you're not going to be at risk of doing a price change from a 20 pack versus a 1 pack to give you kind of a sense. And ultimately, I mean, we've also spoken it at length in previous podcasts. Google prefers you making small incremental nudges, and also this, if you make small incremental nudges in your prices, you're more likely to learn what is the right price point. Whereas if you're doing massive swings and constantly repricing up and down, not only are you going to get penalized in terms of your impression share, but also you're going to find it a lot harder to go, what the hell caused that change in volume sold? You know, you're going to really struggle to get that and know what it was that caused that change in demand.
I think it's a really key point, because it's worth stressing that data is always going to, quote unquote, have a risk of, I was going to say be bad, but have a risk of being bad, right? There's always a probability that a scraped data point is incorrect. And so having proper safeguarding further down your pipeline, just to catch it, so you're not passing on that incorrect data. Okay, so this price has moved, it's like 70%, 80%. We'll flag that. We'll look at that. That needs a manual intervention to make that price change. Is just sensible biz ops for me, really. And rather and a lot of people we work with tend to work like that with reprices. The people I think who do it well anything in the middle of the distribution, like 5% price moves, yeah, send it through. Anything above that, I want to see, and I'm going to top and tail, because there's either something wrong with the data, or more interestingly, your competition is doing something that you need to know about. And this goes all the way back to what you were saying at the start about this other information you get. Why are they suddenly dropping the price by 40%? We weren't expecting that. What's going on here?
There's also some other technical aspects for those techies out there that want to know how you go about collecting competitor data. Location plays a big factor in it. So if I'm searching for products up in Edinburgh, which is in Scotland, if you're not a geographer, versus London, for example, which is in England, I think most people probably get that one. You're likely to get, if we're searching for exactly the same product, you're likely to get different search results. Okay, so therefore, so how do we get around that? Us as a competitor data supplier, ultimately we need to make sure that we have infrastructure in multiple geographic locations, so that when we're doing the search term, it knows, right, okay, the results I'm returning are from Scotland, the results I'm returning are from Northern Ireland, the results I'm returning are from the Southeast. Okay, I mean, our data does indicate that there's less variability within country, in terms of IP addresses versus Durham, which is in the north, versus London, but there is likely to still be some minor variability if you have a particular presence in a certain area.
This is really interesting, I think, because it depends whether you're talking about price or advertising. So from our research, price varies very little, like intra-country. Is that right? Within a country, and we tested this. We spun up servers we did most of the US states, and just kind of clocked through same product. What do we find? And that makes sense, right? Because actually, if you're running just doing heavily regional pricing, it's difficult to maintain. It's a lot of overhead, and also it's had quite a lot of bad press historically. Especially like some things you can do in a subsite, like London's always more expensive for food and drink and whatever, but when it's kind of logistically, it's harder. Like if you're Amazon and your supply centers, distribution centers in Germany anyway, it's harder to justify. So that's point one. So the price doesn't vary. What does vary if you're scraping is the ads that you have access to, like who's advertising, which is I think what you're alluding to there, and that's the really interesting point. It's something we've learned along this journey, really. Because you have to understand how the marketing, like the Google Ads world works, and how that marketing world works to do it effectively. Because you need to. It's not just location; it's time of day. It's all the bid terms basically will affect who you're seeing. So often we'll get, well, I know my competitor. Clients saying, well, why aren't you picking up this competitor selling this product? We know they're doing it. And if your scrape is misconfigured, This is why people like to do scrapes multiple times a day to get kind of more coverage. You could miss them completely because, I don't know, you set them up to run your scrape at midnight and someone's not advertising them because it's not worth it. They're turning their feed off and on dynamically. So that kind of subtlety is where it becomes really important, just from a technical implementation one. I would say if you're looking for a supplier, other people are available. But one of the key questions I would ask is around coverage and when are they scraping and how are they doing it? Because people, everyone says they're automated, right? And some are fully automated. We're fully automated. Others have humans in the wheel, and that is actually a buying decision, because I would argue that the guys with the humans in the wheel can be more accurate than us. We solve a general scalable problem, and that if you wanted a bespoke site scrape, for example, and that these prices have to be exact, if you're in that world, I would say go and talk to someone else. We're not the guys for you. But the thing to ask then is, what's your coverage? We're 24/7, 365, right? That would give or take server downtime and the rest of it. But like, other people aren't, because of the human element. They don't work weekends or public holidays or that kind of stuff, which in e-com, man, if you're working like Cyber Weekend, Christmas, like, that's dangerous territory, because these are the times where, well, traditionally I'd say most price turbulence, but not this year because no one was really discounting. But normally these are the times when people are buying, and so if you're not doing your competitive scraping, if you're doing it Friday, Monday, right, you've missed Saturday, Sunday price changes. And now I think when people are, this is a big change post-COVID, when people are bored at home, I used to shop a lot. I'm sure everyone does at work. You got another tab open, like have a browse, because the weekend you're out doing stuff. I ain't out doing stuff at the minute, right? So I'm much more likely to buy at the weekend. So this coverage question, I think, becomes really key, both locationally, where are their servers at, where are they pinging, and kind of how frequently are they doing it? Are they going to get everyone? And it really is worth saying that there is a price associated to all of this as well, right? In that, like, scraping is it is expensive to maintain. It's the more accurate you want. So our scraping service, I think, relative to the market, is kind of at the cheaper end because we're doing the automated thing. But if you want to go up to the bespoke, we're like hundreds of pounds, and you can get up to the multiple thousands, depending on how many SKUs you want, where they are, how much custom work's required. And at that point, you're almost better off going to the guys in India that will just kind of build you a whole suite that you can then run internally.
Yeah, I mean, we're conscious of time, and we're not going to go into kind of the pros and cons of doing, bespoke versus Google Shopping. But I mean, just to kind of summarize very quickly on that element, you get very good coverage from Google Shopping, especially over the last few years that Google has changed the terms and made it more readily accessible and easier and I think a lot of the starting points for Google Merchant Center are free, so that you update your products online.
I think this is really important, actually, because we're an e-commerce podcast, and I would say in e-com there is no point doing not no point, but like if you're thousands of SKUs, there is very little point doing anything other than Google Shopping, really. You may want to monitor a close competitor or two, but I don't think it's worth it. And it comes down to what we said at the start. What's your buyer's journey? Where are they going through? Who goes direct to a website anymore, right?
And if you find people are going direct to your website, you don't need competitor data, do you? Because you've got the buying power. So I think that's it's working out what the customer journey is, and then working out how much coverage do I get from Google Shopping, and then how can I use that data to kind of inform my decisions. I mean, just conscious of as we move on to the last point, because I think we'll stop there from a bespoke data point, because we're recommending that you use Google Shopping. So there's not too much point looking at bespoke scrapes. But this is where you need lots of humans involved that have to eyeball it. As much as you systemize, robotically crawl certain websites, or put search terms in the website, robotically crawl it, algorithmically check it, fundamentally pretty much all of them have a human that's monitoring that, and anything that's quote unquote is raised and flagged to a human. That's why I've seen quotes for bespoke scrapes going in the kind of hundreds of thousands of pounds.
That really was just that's the core point I was trying to raise, which I think you've done a better job of, is that, like, I don't think in ecom you need to be spending your money there, right? I think the spending a few hundred quid on Google Shopping data and then working with your supplier or doing it internally to filter that and really understand that data is a much better approach than targeting specific people. What happens if you add another competitor to that list, right? Like it doesn't work in this industry in the same way as it does elsewhere. I think you're bang on.
Absolutely. And the last point is that I don't know if you're going to agree with this, but I'm going to go for it and see. We'll have a bit of a debate. Is to think differently, and a lot of the times I touched upon at the beginning that a lot of retailers are saying I only want to make a decision off an exact match. I want to know if you're comparing Energizer pack of 8 with another Energizer pack of 8. And whilst I think absolutely that's a starting point, I want to encourage retailers to somehow think outside that box a bit and come back to also what you said about the user buying journey. And the reason that I'm saying that is, how do people typically buy from you? Are you finding most of the inbound traffic's coming from Google or Google Shopping? In which case they're putting in lots of different terms. They're unlikely to be geeky like us and putting in a GTIN in the search term. Therefore, they're going to get an exact match. They're going to put in batteries, to stick on this example. Okay, what results come back when you put batteries? Okay, therefore, in the eyes of the consumer, there's a high probability that these particular products Google is suggesting, other search engines available, Google is suggesting that these are best for you. Therefore, when the customer is making their decision to buy, this is what they consider is competition. Okay, right? They might be slightly different. They might be a different pack size. They might be a different brand. They might be an inferior brand. They might be a more expensive brand. But fundamentally, this is what the user, I keep saying user, this is what the consumer is saying, is being presented with, and is also assuming what my matches are. Therefore, when you're making decisions, you've got to think a bit more broadly of not just making pricing decisions necessarily off the exact match. You've got to start thinking around making decisions based on the wider context. And the reason for this, okay, is I'm going to say twofold. We'll see if I get to twofold. One of them is because actually only 30% of the time when a user clicks on that product do they buy the product they purchased from you. And that's why working out what the user journey is so important, okay? Because you need to identify that, and actually you might transpire that actually I only need to be in the market price and watch the market on these products, because that's what people are using in their mind of, right, they're on the money for these. They click on that link and then they go to your website, and subsequently they then buy something else. The second reason, so it is twofold because I have remembered what I was going to say. The second reason is because Google's algorithm talks a lot around and is focused a lot around market price, and they build that market price not only on what degree are you away from the average price based on GTIN, but also the whole search term, all kind of. They also use clicks and what people are clicking on subsequently after searching for that product. And therefore, that's why I would encourage you to think around the wider product sets that come based on these search terms. Am I being controversial, obvious? Well, I don't know. I feel like not a lot of people agree with this. I don't know.
I think it's really interesting. I think it depends what you're saying, right? And I'll explain why. So, do I think your competitor data supplier should be making those decisions for you? No. In that, I think that, and I'll go and I'll explain why. And I'm not really talking here about people like us that kind of do more of a holistic play, but I'm talking about if you go out and you want competitive matches, you need to keep that data set pure. That needs to be gold standard. So, and as someone whose whole job is data, you want to be able to, you don't want to pre-process, because I can guarantee that you want to ask a question that doesn't line up. And then you can't, because you've aggregated the bloody data. If I had a penny for that, I would have raised more money than BlackCurve, I think. But like, that's lesson one. So you want to keep the data as raw as possible initially, right? Do I then think you should be building in more sophistication into what's an exact match? Absolutely, right? But I think it's at a product by product level, possibly at a campaign by campaign level. In that, I think I've been thinking about the batteries as we've been doing this podcast, and I think it's a really good example of where you want an exact match, because I probably I'm only looking at Duracell and Energizer batteries, and they will be within a range probably, but realistically I'm only looking at Duracell, so you only should be matching on the exact match for Duracell and what your competitors are doing at that point. If we get into something like, what a glass is always with a free coaster, but a glass is always a really good example. I quite like this glass, maybe it's less one because it's got cool handholds. But if you say your glass, which is, I think, a fairly standard,
a bit dull. This is IKEA. I like IKEA, but it's
an IKEA one.
Cheap and cheerful.
There are a lot of suppliers making a lot of glasses that look like that, and so a GTIN match there when your pricing becomes less useful, because you could be getting undercut by 20% by a different supplier. And what that's saying is that if you want to offer a glass that looks like that, and you can't compete with that product, you should be switching your product out for that other product given by that supplier. Or even if you can and it's cheaper, you should be doing that because you can switch out for exactly the same product and increase your margin. So that's where I think you become correct. But I think the key point is that you need to keep the data as pure as possible to allow you to kind of segment and make a number of decisions. And then the other thing that is interesting with the Google example is that it's really worth stressing that Google does not view products the same way that BlackCurve views products. So we price on a product basis. Google looks at kind of campaigns and individual, my mind's gone blank, it's probably the back, but like individual people within that audience. There we go. They build audiences and then match that audience, and that's how they build their kind of the adverts out. And that you can map products to that kind of audience and click-through rate and the rest of it, but it's actually two very different ways of seeing the world. And so that's really important to bear in mind, in that there's probably a lot of useful information in that, but it will be very industry specific, and it's unlikely that kind of a third party data supplier will have that level of knowledge to really help you do what you're getting at there, I think.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. I mean, I think, I'm not sitting here saying, well, BlackCurve solves a lot of your worldly problems, but I very much treat BlackCurve as an enabler for you to make decisions. Our strap line is we help you make pricing decisions. Okay, so whilst that can be automated, we're also trying to push you and challenge you so that you don't hit that glass ceiling. And that's why I did mention that actually a good starting point is that exact match. And you've referred to it as making sure that your data is as pure as possible. But I feel that I almost feel that if you've hit a glass ceiling and you're wondering, right, I've done that, I've ticked that off, I think I've worked out what my competitors are, what my competitor matches are, and I need to grow more. I need to test more. This is when you can start to expand your horizons. And so I feel this is, if you're at that kind of level of maturity, this is when you can start to price test and open up to, well, actually, maybe it's worth picking these products here I'm less concerned about and expanding my definition of market price and using the definition of market price based on, I don't know, just more general terms. Like, I mean, it's probably too general, batteries, but to keep the example simple, using the term batteries as your market price for that decision rather than the exact GTIN.
I do actually completely agree with that. In that, I think what you're alluding to, or what I'm getting from this, is that it's what we've spoken about before, is that you need to tie your pricing heavily into your marketing. So if Google's providing a market price, that's what your benchmark should be. You should be closing that kind of virtuous cycle, because that will ensure that your pricing isn't hammering your ad spend, for example, just for like a point of fact thing, because that is where the biggest search engine in the world that kind of provides, I don't know this, I should know this stat, I'm going to go find the stat, but I don't know how much shopping traffic goes through Google Shopping, like percentage
a
in
lot.
The world. Yeah, exactly. a metric ton, I don't know. If that's what they're benchmarking against, that's what you should be. Whether that's your internal benchmark, I don't know, but you should be aware of it for sure. Like,
because I mean, you can monitor. You then monitor the performance of it, right? If you think about it from your marketing, your ad spend, you're constantly using metrics to justify whether your spend is converting. And exactly the same, if you're using that ecosystem and those definitions and those metrics to determine whether or not your ad's effective, this is how you can start to mirror that in your pricing. And you can, right, okay, I'm going to do a test. I'm going to expand for these products. I'm going to base my decisions on a different string of search terms. And you can monitor, does that change my share of impression? Does that increase my clicks? Does that reduce my cost per click? That's what I'm trying to get at, is trying to, expand people's horizons.
I completely agree with that. Because I think it's really not well understood how pricing affects, you're talking about a lot of advertising metrics there, and they are linked, but people don't line them up very often. And you don't think that, okay, well, I've made my product more competitive, but that's actually negatively affected my ad spend, because the amount of margin I have to play within a ROAS, like return on ad spend strategy, has now dropped, right? So my bids have to come down, so my share of impressions comes down, and so my net profitability, what I thought I was going to like make more money by shifting boxes cheaper, which is a traditional way, price optimization, may actually not work in a kind of price elastic sense when it should, because of your ad spend factor in over here, right?
Fantastic. Well, I think we had a good debate there. I think it was good. I'm glad that I was challenged. So at the beginning, so I hope we haven't gone off too much of a tangent on talking about I think we've mentioned Google quite a lot today, but I think it is important that you have that explanation of how these ecosystems work in conjunction with pricing. And I hope we've kept a balance between how you go about collecting competitor data and how we go about, in this instance we covered more on how you collect competitor data from Google Shopping, but I think it's important that if you don't worry too much about the technical aspects of collecting it and kind of assume that a provider such as BlackCurve's got that covered, you then elevate your questions of how can I use that more effectively to grow my business. And that's primarily what we've tried to push, or that's the drum I'm trying to beat, certainly at the end of today's podcast. So thank you very much, Rob, joining. We're eCommerce Matters. We're available on all major podcasting platforms. We look forward to welcoming you next time. Take care. Goodbye.